Before we start the show, I want to say a quick thank you for being a listener and to explain a little more about why my colleagues and I hope you subscribe to The Washington Post. The Post newsroom has published more than 100 scoops so far this year. Exclusive stories reported by our newsroom, holding power to account and keeping you informed. That's what drives our work. It's the work that you support as a subscriber. If you're not one already, this is a great time to take that step. Our Memorial Day sale is still going on for a few more days. You can unlock your subscription for just $2 every 4 weeks for a whole year. After that, it's just $12 every 4 weeks. You can cancel anytime. So hit pause right now and follow the link in our show notes or go to WashingtonPost.com/subscribe. In a few minutes, you'll have more of what's happening in the world right at your fingertips. This offer is good for a limited time, so really do not wait. We're so excited to welcome you as a subscriber. Now here's the show.
The House Committee on Elections will come to order. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Shaheen.
Here.
Vice Chair Busey. Representative Isaac.
That's a recent state legislative committee hearing in Texas about a possible new voting law.
Chair lays out House Bill 5337 and recognizes Representative Isaac to explain the bill.
It would require anyone who wants to vote in Texas to prove they are a U.S. citizen. Here's bill sponsor Republican State Representative Carrie Isaac.
We already require proof of citizenship when applying for a passport or a driver's license, something far less sacred than voting in our elections. It's not unreasonable to apply the same standards to the foundation of our democracy.
Supporters of the bill say having to prove who you are with a birth certificate or other official document, that's necessary to prevent voter fraud. But that kind of fraud has never been proven to happen at any kind of meaningful scale. And critics say those laws are just going to make it harder for everyone to register to vote. Here's State Representative John Busey III, a Democrat, from that same committee hearing.
I'm just afraid that what we're doing here is creating hurdles for legal, eligible Texas citizens.
From the newsroom of The Washington Post, this is Post Reports. I'm Colby Ickowitz. It's Tuesday, May 27th. Today, I speak with democracy reporters Patrick Marley and Yvonne Winjet-Sanchez about how proof of citizenship laws are spreading across the country. Yvonne and Patrick explain why this is happening and whose votes are at risk. Patrick, Yvonne, I'm so excited to have you in studio, especially because you're not normally here. Yvonne, you're normally across the country in Arizona, and Patrick, you are in Wisconsin, and I am doubly excited because you are my colleagues from the democracy team, and we worked together so closely last year on the election. So thank you for joining me.
We're excited to be here.
It's good to be reunited.
It's nice to be in a studio and not a closet.
Yes, yes. So for the sake of our listeners, describe where this push to require voters to prove their citizenship came from.
Largely from Donald Trump. He has been talking for years that undocumented migrants are voting in elections, which is not true. It's certainly not, there are instances of it happening, but there's no large-scale effort to do this.
Jumping off from that, as an example, this is one of the big categories of people that he cited as having stolen the election or helping steal the election from him in 2020.
Our country has had enough. We will not take it anymore, and that's what this is all about. And to use a favorite term that all of you people really came up with, we will stop the steal.
So it was, accusations that dead people had voted, accusations that illegal immigrants had voted.
There's only one reason the Democrats could possibly want to eliminate signature matching, oppose voter ID, and stop citizenship confirmation. Are you a citizenship? You're not allowed to ask that question.
This really traces back to that.
He's focused on this for a long time. In March, he signed an executive order that was aimed at requiring voters to prove they're citizens before they can register to vote. That has been blocked by a court. And so this effort has shifted to some degree to state legislatures to put documentary proof of citizenship requirements in place.
Was this something that Republicans had even brought up or talked about before Trump, or this is really a Trump-made issue?
Republicans in Arizona have been talking about this for as long as I can remember. For 20 years, they have been pushing to crack down in big ways and in small ways on non-citizen voting, which, as we've said, is exceedingly rare. We've passed laws in Arizona to try to prevent this, and these laws have spread to other states, including New Hampshire and now possibly Texas.
So Arizona does have a proof of citizenship requirement.
We do.
So guys, other states, they've passed this law. So what makes it so significant that Texas is also considering it?
No place anywhere near as large as Texas has passed this, second most populous state in the country. There's 18.6 million voters on the rolls. And Texas will go further than the law in some other states because it will not only apply to people who newly register, but to those who are already on the voter rolls. And so officials are going to have to look back at the 18.5 million people who are on the rolls and figure out which of them they don't know are citizens and require them to provide some kind of information. Initially, Texas officials think that's about 500,000 people, some of whom may have been voting for a very long time.
Because right now, in many states, it's just an honor system, right? You check a box that says, yes, I'm a U.S. citizen, but they don't check to verify that.
That's right. The disincentive to do that is that it's a criminal penalty if you do it. If for non-citizens who would sign that statement and attempt to vote, they could be deported, they could be charged with crimes.
Ivan, how hard is it going to be for people, how hard is it for people maybe in Arizona to prove that they're citizens?
For a lot of people, it's not going to be difficult. And these are going to be the people who know exactly where their birth certificates are. They know where their naturalization papers are. They have a passport at the ready, and they can prove that they are who they say they are. But there's a whole class of people, i.e. women, who maybe have gotten married, have gotten divorced, have changed their name in some form or fashion, don't know where their papers are. Maybe in the instance of one of the women we talked to, there's a tragic event, like a house burns down and you lose some of your documents. These people could be affected in a way that men probably won't be because it is more rare for men to change their names.
Yvonne, you talked to a lot of women for this story. Tell me about another story you heard.
My name story? I'll tell you my name story, okay?
Perfect. Okay. Okay, so Isabella is a Democrat from Dallas.
So I was born Janine Ides. That's I-D-E-S, the Ides of March.
And Isabella has been married a couple of times.
I get married again, and this time I decide I don't want to lose my last name like last time.
She's changed her first name.
And I really wasn't fond of the name Janine, okay? All right? Okay. So I become Isabella Russell-Hyde.
Oh.
And so her name on her official documents now looks completely different than the name that she was born with 77 years ago.
Wow.
She recently tried to get approval to get expedited security clearance at the airport.
And you have to prove who you are, okay? I had the papers, the birth certificate, my first divorce, my legal name change, and they wouldn't give it to me.
And they essentially told her, look, lady, you're going to have to go figure it out and reconcile your paperwork. And this is the experience that people like her may be facing.
But this bill is very upsetting. It's going to be so much harder for women who don't have the economic means to go through all this.
So I remember from my reporting on this, and you both have mentioned, non-citizen voting nationwide is exceedingly rare. But is it a problem in Texas? Is it actually a thing there?
I mean, there's not very many documented cases of non-citizens winding up on the rolls. There's fewer cases of them attempting to vote. The ones who have been on the rolls, often it happens because somebody's at the driver's license station and they click a box to register to vote, not being aware. And then when there's follow-up, because they might get some other evidence that this person's a non-citizen, they take them off the rolls, or oftentimes the immigrants will say they want to be off the rolls because they don't want to break the rules. So there's no evidence that it's happening in Texas more than it's happening anywhere in the country.
Yeah.
And it's just very rare to happen.
Like, just how rare is it?
So just for example, we have about 36 or so non-citizens who were on the voter rolls in Kansas over 19 years, according to a federal judge in 2018. And most of those people ended up on the voter rolls because of administrative errors, not because they deliberately went out there, said they were eligible voters, and then voted.
So it's not even a question of these people then voted. It's just the fact that they're registered to vote. Is that correct?
That's right.
Well, I was going to say most races are not won by, a couple dozen votes. They're won by hundreds, if not thousands. So for the Republicans, they're just saying it's principle?
They're saying it's principle. And I mean, every vote counts. You do have some local elections that are decided by a handful of votes. And the argument is that one illegal vote diminishes by a small amount the vote of every legitimate vote that is cast. I did talk to some voting rights advocates who make the counterpoint that, likewise, a vote that should have been cast that was not is also a diminishment of the right to vote.
Yeah.
And so there's that is the balance. I think everybody agrees that, only eligible voters should vote. It's a matter of how do you strike that balance of getting all the people who want to vote an ability to vote and prevent the people who are not allowed to vote from voting.
And it's the kind of idea and proposal that seems pretty basic and common sense for a lot of people, including Democrats. And when you talk to them about the concept of ensuring that only American citizens are allowed to vote in American elections, almost everyone universally agrees with that.
Right. Democrats even agree with that.
Totally.
Yes.
It's just how, when the rubber hits the road, how is that implemented?
After the break, we'll talk about what's happened in other states that have tried this and why Republicans are pushing for these laws, even though their voters could be more affected. We'll be right back.
My name is Tom Sietsema, and I am the food critic for The Washington Post. I think a lot of great restaurant meals are like great books, films, or concerts. You don't necessarily need them to live, but don't they make life more worth living? I see myself as sort of a reader advocate going in there, spending the Post's money, coming back and giving you the green light, yield sign, or a stop sign. I like to be seen as sort of the best friend who happens to eat out a lot more than they do. I eat in about 10 restaurants a week. And I like creating memories for people and helping them create memories, whether those are first date, a 50th anniversary, grandma's 90th birthday, if you have special needs, whether they're dietary or otherwise. When you subscribe to The Washington Post, you support this kind of journalism. Learn more at subscribe.washingtonpost.com. I'm Tom Sietsema, and I'm one of the people behind the Post.
So other states have tried this. And do we know how many voters in those states have been turned away? How many have faced these type of problems? Like, has it been difficult to administer this law?
So speaking about Arizona.
Yeah.
We've been doing this for about 20 years or so. There was recently a big error that was discovered where officials thought that they had the proof of citizenship for about 200,000 voters.
Yeah.
They didn't. And so now all of these county officials across the state are going back to these voters and they're notifying them with letters saying, hey, your voting status, your voter registration may be in jeopardy because we've realized that we don't have proof that your citizenship was checked. And what they're being met with on the ground is hostility from voters who are upset that they're being asked to prove their citizenship with incredulity that, like, oh my gosh, I've been voting for 30 years and now you're asking me to prove something? Why? And suspicion. A lot of people think that these letters are scammy, or they don't trust their local election officials because maybe they belong to the opposite party, or they think that this is somehow part of what President Trump is doing, in Washington, and somehow they're being asked to prove something that they don't necessarily always want to prove. And so, again, the rollout is not as easy as the announcement or even in some instances the passage of the policy.
And in the Arizona case of those 200,000 voters, have they found actual non-citizens in that group of people?
Not yet, not that we're aware of.
We've not heard of any cases of that. But even the officials who support this measure say they have no reason to suspect that these 200,000 people, it's kind of rooted in an IT quirk. These are people who are longtime voters, likely been voting in Arizona for decades.
And now they might not be able to vote.
Yeah, that's correct.
And the biggest category of people who are affected are Republicans.
So I wanted to talk about that because we mentioned that this push to root out non-citizens who might be voting has been a huge talking point for President Trump. And the Republicans, whenever there's a policy that's backed by one side of the aisle or the other, you have to assume maybe there's a political advantage. So can we talk about the politics of this?
I mean, I don't think we really know what it's going to look like until it happens. And it's going to affect people from both parties, and it's going to affect independents. I mean, it's just going to be this person happens to know where their documents are and the person next to them doesn't, and that sort of doesn't take into account partisanship. But there is some anecdotal data that it would hurt Republicans more than Democrats. In Texas, there was a review by some researchers at the University of Maryland, and they found that Democrats were more likely to have passports or have access to a birth certificate than Republicans. There's a lot of people who don't have passports.
Yeah.
And, rural people tend to be more Republican, and they might have more trouble getting their birth certificates if they don't know where they are because they're further from government offices and things like that.
Have Republicans, talked about that part of it, that it could politically hurt them?
Republicans will talk privately about that.
Okay.
The people that we are in touch with and have talked quite a bit about this topic with are very much aware of what the challenges are for their own party. But they're sort of unwilling to talk about those challenges publicly because it runs counter to the prevailing Republican viewpoint on this, which is you must crack down and prevent voting by undocumented immigrants, which, again, is just not happening.
So the way I've always understood it, at least the Republican argument, is that the goal is to crack down on even the smallest possibility that someone could vote illegally. But the reality is that a lot of American citizens don't vote. And Patrick, isn't it true that voting rights advocates have been arguing for years that we should be making voting easier, not harder?
I mean, that's precisely what they're saying, is that voting should be easy. That the system that we have in place now in most states where you check the box, it's effective. We know that it's a deterrent because so few non-citizens attempt to vote and even fewer actually vote. There's only a handful of states that have laws like this. In addition to Arizona, which was the first state to do this, you've got New Hampshire, Louisiana, and Wyoming all have recent laws. And so there's already been lawsuits filed in those states. This is going to get back to the Supreme Court. In the next couple of years, this is going to be one of the big voting rights issues for the courts to wrestle with.
And what do those lawsuits say is unlawful? What are they challenging?
What they say is that this is a fundamental right, the right to vote, and that these kinds of laws interfere with their due process and equal protection aspects of the federal Constitution. Somebody here in the country is a citizen, and they can't lay their hands on their paperwork. You can't charge them money. That's a poll tax to make them pay money to get on the rolls. And so there's constitutional questions that remain open for the Supreme Court to consider.
I see. So is because of Texas's size, is it kind of seen like a test case for rolling this out nationally?
Yeah, I don't know that I would say that it's a test so much. It's like they're on the front end of an emerging wave of states that are doing this.
Yeah.
And, we've already had these other states do it. But I think the dam could sort of break with Texas because, a lot of other states will look to them and see that, this large Republican state was able to do this. And there will be others who join on.
And there's a federal version of this, too. We have a bill that has already passed the House, the SAVE Act, that would require this as well.
Yeah, Patrick, you and I have written about the National SAVE Act together, but it's been a few months now. So where does it stand?
The House passed it. The Senate is now focused on its budget bill. It is popular with the Republican base, but it's tough to get stuff through the Senate because of the filibuster. And so, I think they would have to either change the filibuster rules or have something really magical happen for them to get that through.
And we know that Republican senators are closely watching how the citizenship efforts in Arizona are going. They have read about the challenges that are unfolding as we speak in Arizona, and they are seeing the impact that's having on their voters, on Republican voters. And so it'll be interesting to see, even if it's a watered-down version, if this is something they decide to pass.
So guys, at the end of the day, if these bills do become law, do we have any idea if they would actually end up suppressing kind of large numbers of votes from legitimate citizen voters, as a lot of people seem to be warning?
I mean, these laws are so new. We're going to just have to see how this plays out. There's going to be some number of people who aren't able to produce this material who, are legitimate citizens. We just don't know how big a number that's going to be.
Well, thank you both so much. It was so good to see you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Colby.
Yvonne Winjet Sanchez and Patrick Marley cover democracy for The Post. That's it for Post Reports. Thanks for listening. Today's show was produced by Laura Benshoff and edited by Maggie Penman. It was mixed by Sam Baer. I'm Colby Ickowitz. We'll be back tomorrow with more stories from The Washington Post.